Let go of unexpressed dreams. Find deep inner peace. Zen sleep story. A heavy, choking tightness is lodging directly at the base of your throat tonight. A quiet, aching constriction born from years of swallowing your genuine creative impulses and burying your artistic voice beneath practical demands. You lie awake carrying the silent grief of unexpressed gifts, feeling as though the true songs, stories, or drawings you were meant to offer the world have withered inside you, trapped behind a wall of obligation and fear. There is a sharp, persistent mourning vibrating in your upper chest, whispering that you traded your authentic expression for safety, that the seasons have passed you by, and that it is far too late now to bring anything of real beauty into the light. Let the air around your bed grow cool, aromatic, and still, saturated with the rich scent of mountain cedar resin, damp bark, iron rasp oil, and crushed fir needles. Imagine resting in a quiet timber workshop nestled in a mountain grove, where the night breeze whispers through open cedar eaves and the floorboards are cushioned with a thick, soft carpet of fresh wood shavings. The sturdy bed frame beneath your spine holds your body with total, unyielding support, cradling your heavy shoulders, your tired back, and your tight neck, without requiring you to produce a single word, stroke, or masterpiece tonight. If you are carrying the bitter belief that your silent throat makes you a failure or a lost cause, let that heavy judgment fall onto the fragrant wood floor right now. Your quiet spirit is not ruined or broken, nor does your years of silence mean that your creative fire has been extinguished forever. Your choked voice is simply a delicate grain that went underground to protect itself from harsh weather. And no law under heaven demands that you prove your artistic worth before you are permitted to sleep. Tonight, your weary awareness can step away from the workbench and rest softly within the untouched, fragrant timber of your present breath. Consider the strange, painful paradox that sits at the center of our creative mourning. The more frantically we attempt to force a magnificent monument out of our lives, to prove we were here, the more paralyzed and choked our expression becomes. We assume that unless we produce a towering masterpiece that commands worldly applause, our time on earth has been entirely wasted. Yet ancient contemplative wisdom offers a surprising, liberating perspective. Trying to force a rigid, unnatural shape onto a raw block of wood only dulls the chisel, splits the timber, and leaves the carver exhausted and full of regret. True creative fulfillment is never found in building giant monuments for the ego. True creative peace arrives when you realize that your life is a raw block of wild cedar, and that making a single, unhurried cut along the natural grain of this present second fulfills the spirit completely, whether anyone ever applauds the finished form or not. Dear friend, right now, maybe you have felt this quiet choking too, during those long night hours when you look back over the years and grieve the poems you never wrote, the music you never played, or the canvases you left blank. You might feel a dull, hollow ache behind your breastbone whenever you see others creating freely, leaving you feeling small, invisible, and permanently left behind. You might believe that because you did not cultivate your artistic gifts earlier, your inner voice has been forever silenced, forcing you to carry a heavy boulder of regret wherever you go. If you have been treating your quiet throat as a personal disgrace, know that your weary heart is welcomed with complete, patient tenderness here. Take a slow, quiet breath through your nose, letting the crisp, cedar-scented air fill your throat and expand your ribs, and let it slip gently from your lips like warm mist dissolving in a cool room. You do not need to compose a single brilliant line before dawn arrives, nor do you need to dissolve every regret sitting in your chest right now. There are no exhibition halls you must fill in this shadowy workshop, and if it feels right, you can set down your heavy carving chisels for the next short while. You can simply allow your tired body to sink into the steady bed, letting your awareness pull back from the lost years and rest within the raw, aromatic beauty of this immediate second. In a short while, our path will lead into a shaded mountain timber yard, where an aging woodcarver uses a curved iron draw knife with smooth stag antler handles to show a grieving carpenter why beauty does not live in grand halls, but in following the natural knots of a simple piece of orchard wood. But for now, allow your jaw to soften. Let the cool, resinous air soothe your tight throat and your tense neck. Allow your arms to rest heavy along your sides, your hands opening into soft, receptive stillness. Notice where your upper chest is holding that tight, protective constriction against unlived dreams, and offer those sore muscles permission to yield against the mattress. Listen to the soft, rhythmic brushing of pine branches against the timber eaves outside. You do not have to carve a masterpiece out of your life tonight, because a block of wild mountain cedar does not need to become a temple pillar to be precious. It only needs to rest in its natural grain, resting quietly in the fragrant, unhurried dark. Up in the high timberlands where mountain streams carve deep channels through gray slate, a rustic woodshop sits beneath a grove of ancient cedar trees. The air inside smells richly of damp pine needles, iron rasp oil, wet river gravel, and sweet cedar shavings. Working in this quiet yard is Cale, a middle-aged carpenter who has spent 30 years building plain-grain storage bins and functional farm fence posts for the lowland villages. His hands are thick, calloused, and stained with wood tannin. His jaw stays tightly set, and a heavy, choking constriction constantly presses against his throat. In his youth, Cale possessed a rare, brilliant talent for carving exquisite decorative screens, delicate wooden lattices, and sweeping temple arches. But when his family faced hardship decades ago, he set aside his carving gouges, buried his artistic ambitions, and chose the safe, repetitive labor of building basic storage boxes. Now, in the autumn of his life, a bitter grief consumes his thoughts. He looks at the thousands of rough, rectangular grain bins he produced, feeling as though he wasted his life, silenced his true voice, and allowed his inner fire to burn down to useless ash. His throat aches continuously with unspoken regret, convinced that it is far too late to create anything of lasting beauty. Sitting on a low cedar stump near the shaving pile is Master Vale, an aging woodcarver who shapes simple spoons and quiet bowls from twisted, fallen orchard limbs. Master Vale wears a dark gray tunic stiffened by dried resin, his silver hair bound with a hemp cord, his face weathered like ancient driftwood. He works without haste, holding a curved iron draw knife fitted with smooth, yellowed stag antler handles. The iron blade glides across a raw block of wild cedar, producing thin, aromatic ribbon curls that fall softly onto his lap. Cale stands over his workbench, his chest tight, his hands shaking as he stares at a stack of uniform pine boards cut for grain bins. He drops his heavy iron square onto the bench with a loud, hollow thud, his voice rising in bitter frustration. He tells the master that his life has been a complete failure, that he spent his best years making identical boxes for cattle feed, and that he feels like a hollow tree whose core has rotted away. He admits that every time he looks at a piece of wood, his throat clamps tight with the realization that he will never build the magnificent temple pavilion he dreamed of as a young man. Master Vale does not interrupt the carpenter's painful confession, nor does he offer shallow words of comfort. He sets down his sanding stone, holds up the curved iron draw knife, and turns the antler handles gently in the cool mountain light. He points the curved blade toward a knotty, twisted piece of wild orchard wood resting in a basket nearby. A block full of dark, irregular grain swirls and deep bark inclusions that most builders would discard as useless waste. Master Vale asks Cale to sit on the timber bench, take the stag-handled draw knife into his own hands, and try to shave a single smooth ribbon from the knotty orchard wood. Cale steps forward, his neck rigid, his breathing fast and shallow. He takes the antler handles into his calloused palms, feeling their smooth, cool weight. He sets the sharp iron edge against the top of the wild wood block and pulls backward with sudden, violent force, trying to shave a straight, perfect line down the center. But the iron blade digs violently into a dense knot, stalling mid-stroke, splitting the grain, and jarring Cale's shoulders with a harsh, painful vibration. Cale lets out a bitter laugh, his jaw clenching tight, his throat choking with familiar despair. He tells the elder master that the wood is stubborn, ruined, and unworkable, just like his own missed life, proving that nothing beautiful can ever be carved from a block filled with so many crooked knots and dark scars. Master Vale reaches out his weathered hand and places his palm gently over Cale's tense knuckles. He asks the younger man why he is trying to force a straight, rigid line across a piece of wood that grew in a curving mountain wind. The old carver adjusts Cale's grip on the stag antler handles, slanting the iron blade at a soft angle so that the steel meets the grain sideways rather than head-on. He tells Kale to stop trying to force the wood to look like a straight pine board for a storage box. He asks him to feel the curve of the knot with his fingers, lower his shoulders, and pull the draw knife gently along the natural arc of the wood's own growth ring. Kale takes a long, slow breath of the resin-scented air. Letting his tense jaw unlock, he tilts the draw knife sideways, aligns the blade with the dark, swirling ring around the central knot, and pulls softly toward his chest. The sharp iron edge glides smoothly across the dense timber without sticking or splitting. A paper-thin, golden ribbon of wild cedar curls upward from the blade, releasing a sudden, rich burst of sweet mountain fragrance into the cool air. Beneath the shaved layer, an exquisite shimmering pattern of deep amber waves and rich mahogany swirls reveals itself around the knot, far more complex and beautiful than any straight pine board could ever offer. Kale stops his hand, staring down at the exposed wood grain in utter silence. The draw knife rests lightly in his fingers, its antler handles cool against his warm skin. He looks at the intricate dark knot that he had called ruined moments before, seeing how the wood had grown around its old wounds to create a rich, breathtaking landscape of natural beauty. A sudden, deep wave of emotional recognition hits Kale's chest, melting the cold, hard lump that had choked his throat for 30 years. Tears spring to his eyes, falling onto the fresh cedar shavings at his feet. He realizes with sudden clarity that he had spent decades torturing himself for not building a grand temple, treating his ordinary life as a ruined piece of wood, completely blind to the fact that every year of hard labor had carved its own unique, beautiful grain into his soul. He sees that his voice was never lost or destroyed by building storage bins. It was simply waiting beneath the surface, needing only a gentle, unhurried hand to follow its natural curve. Master Vale takes the curved draw knife back, setting it down softly beside the golden pile of cedar shavings. He tells the carpenter that a tree does not grow to produce timber for a palace. It grows simply because it delights in reaching toward the sun. Kale sits quietly on the low timber bench, his hands resting loose on his knees, his shoulders dropping away from his ears. He takes a deep, clear breath of the mountain air, feeling his throat open wide and free, realizing that he does not need 30 years of applause to be whole, because shaping one honest curve right now fulfills his heart completely. This quiet realization beside the mountain timber yard opens a doorway into how our spirit creates its own unnecessary imprisonment. Ancient contemplative wisdom does not ask you to deaden your creative passion, nor does it demand that you become indifferent to the work of your hands. When the old carver tilts the iron blade to meet the natural growth ring, he is showing us how our internal demands transform a life full of natural curves into a painful, choking burden. Consider what happens inside your own chest when you look back over lost years and unfulfilled ambitions. In those quiet hours, our desperate craving for grand legacy acts like a heavy, blunt chisel, hacking violently against the delicate grain of our actual reality. We demand that our path should have been a straight, flawless plank of pine, believing that unless we built a massive monument for the world to applaud, our presence here was a tragic mistake. The deep lineage of Buddhist insight shows us that human heartbreak is constructed from two very different layers of experience. The first layer is the simple, honest flow of life itself, the natural condition that seasons change, that practical duties often require our immediate care, and that our artistic choices took real detours along the way. You may have chosen a steady job to feed your family, set aside a paintbrush to care for a child, or put down a journal during years of survival. That primary detour is a clean, natural event, a bend in the wood that carries no inherent shame or spiritual failure. The secondary layer, however, is where our chronic, choking grief is forged over time. It happens when our mind takes that natural bend and spends decades dragging a rusty blade across it in self-punishment. We do not merely acknowledge that our path took an unexpected turn. We declare that our voice was permanently murdered by those choices. The original sacrifice was simply a choice made to honor a practical duty, but our self-judgment turns it into a lifelong sentence of creative mourning, clamping our throats shut every time we think of what might have been. When ancient teachings speak of releasing attachment, they are not commanding you to throw away your brushes, burn your notebooks, or abandon your love for beauty. They are describing the quiet, liberating realization that your worth as a living being was never dependent on building a grand temple for your ego. True peace becomes possible when you stop forcing a straight line onto a life that grew through wild mountain storms. Your creative spirit is not a product to be sold or a monument to be praised. It is the raw, living timber of your present awareness, completely whole and precious in every unhurried cut you make today. Gentle awareness, in this quiet setting, is the calm presence that notices when you are hacking against your own grain. It is not a harsh critic reprimanding you for feeling regretful or bitter. It is simply the skilled, loving hand that reaches out, softens your white-knuckled grip on the iron handles, and invites you to tilt the blade so it glides smoothly along your real story. It is choosing to stop fighting the knot in your wood and starting to appreciate the rich amber curves that only long years of living could ever forge. When we lack this quiet presence, our unexpressed gifts turn into a heavy boulder resting upon our lungs. We tell ourselves that because we did not master an art form in our youth, we are barred from ever enjoying the simple pleasure of expression again. We convince ourselves that unless we can produce a masterpiece, we must remain entirely silent, punishing our own hearts for the crime of being human and imperfect. The truth of impermanence brings immense relief to this heavy, choking regret. Impermanence reminds us that time is not a vanishing bank account that leaves you bankrupt in your later years, but a continuous, flowing stream that offers fresh cedar wood in every single second. The decades you believe were lost are no longer happening, and the imagined legacy you fear you missed was merely a phantom born in your thoughts. The present moment is entirely untouched by your past silences, holding open a spacious workshop where your voice can breathe without needing permission from the years behind you. If we allow our awareness to settle like cool mountain mist among the cedar trees, a deep compassion opens within the chest. This compassion begins when you extend unconditional gentleness to the tired, creative person who has been carrying a choked throat for so long. It is the choice to forgive yourself for choosing safety when safety was needed, and to recognize that your artistic soul was never destroyed by your practical choices. Your voice was simply resting beneath the bark, waiting patiently for you to treat your own story with kindness. Notice how your mind might still attempt to resist this soft release. You might hear an anxious thought, insisting that if you do not feel guilty for your unexpressed talents, you are admitting defeat, or that letting go of your artistic regret means your youth was wasted. That defensive thought is merely an old habit of self-judgment, built by an ego that learned to mistake self-punishment for genuine passion. You can let that heavy, blunt chisel rest quietly on the cedar shavings beside your bench tonight. You do not need to compose a brilliant song before dawn, nor do you need to justify your existence by planning a late-life masterpiece. The simple act of breathing through your open throat is enough. Just as the old carpenter sat on his bench and watched the golden ribbon of wild wood curl up from the blade, simply honoring the raw grain of your present breath is the exact moment your creative spirit comes home to rest. In a short while, we will enter a gentle inner practice that allows your physical throat and chest to loosen their long tightness, letting your awareness move like a smooth draw knife through soft cedar, shaving away the old bark of regret and uncovering the unblemished grain that has been waiting within you all along. But for now, let the resinous mountain air fill your lungs, knowing that a block of wild cedar does not need to become a temple pillar to be holy. It fulfills its purpose completely simply by being what it is in the quiet dark. If it feels comfortable for you in this still space, allow your breathing to find its own natural, easy cadence. There is no need to measure the depth of your air, nor do you have to force your lungs into a rigid, artificial rhythm. Simply feel the cool breeze entering your throat, resting for a soft moment within your chest, before drifting quietly back into the shadows of your room. If your neck or jaw feels tight from holding back your true voice, let those muscles remain as they are without demanding an instant change. Perhaps you might bring a gentle, soft awareness to the physical sensations in your vocal cords, your collarbones, and the hollow at the base of your throat. Notice if there is a tight, dry knot sitting behind your breastbone, as though your body is still guarding an unexpressed song against cold judgment. You can allow your teeth to part slightly, letting your tongue soften against the floor of your mouth, and allow your shoulders to drop away from your ears, giving your lungs permission to expand without carrying the weight of unlived years. As you rest here in the dark, a specific memory of an abandoned project, a silent moment where you hid your truth, or a persistent fear of having wasted your life might rise into your awareness. It could be an old painting you never finished, a book you left unwritten, or a quiet resentment that you spent your best energy on ordinary chores. Do not push this painful thought away, nor do you need to blame yourself for keeping silent. Simply observe the feeling as if it were a rough block of uncarved wood sitting on a timber workbench. Perhaps you can give this internal habit a quiet, compassionate name. You might silently whisper to yourself, mourning the lost years, or forcing the straight line, or afraid to express. Giving a name to the pattern softens its power to choke your throat. It changes a lifelong weight of regret into a simple, temporary thought passing through the wide, fragrant room of your awareness. Now, if it feels right, bring into your mind the image of that curved iron draw knife fitted with smooth, yellowed stag antler handles. Picture holding those cool handles in your palms, feeling the solid weight of the tool and the sharp, polished curve of the steel blade. Imagine gently placing every heavy regret over unfulfilled dreams, every fear of being too old, and every bitter thought of lost time directly onto that curved iron blade. Let the cool metal receive the full weight of your self-judgment, holding it without bending, without dulling, and without demanding that you fix your past tonight. Instead of hacking against your own history, picture your entire neck, throat, and chest becoming like a raw block of wild mountain cedar. Feel the deep, fragrant grain of your living frame, complete with its natural swirls, dark knots, and hidden rings. Imagine using your breath like the antler-handled draw knife, gliding softly at an angle across the top layer of your tight bark. See how the smooth blade shaves away thin, paper-like ribbons of old tension, letting golden curls of cedar fall away onto the floor, uncovering the rich amber beauty of the grain underneath. Notice what happens to your chest as you allow your breath to glide along the natural arc of your life. You might feel a gentle loosening in the muscles around your collarbones as your lungs expand into the cool, resinous air. You might feel your neck relaxing into the pillow, surrendering its long, exhausting effort to hold back your voice. The grand expectations and harsh judgments of the world remain outside, while you rest in this quiet timber yard, completely whole in your raw, natural state. If another wave of vocal tightness or creative regret rises in your body, you can allow that feeling to be carved away as well. Watch how the iron blade meets the knotty timber without sticking, moving smoothly along the dark ring, transforming what felt like a ruined spot into an exquisite, shimmering wave of natural wood. The heavy thoughts slide past, the draw knife rests gently in your hands, and the quiet workshop enfolds your rest in deep, aromatic ease. Perhaps you can picture tiny, cool particles of cedar mist drifting through the night air, soothing the tired throat that has held back your truth for so long. Feel the damp alpine breeze cooling your forehead and your neck, softening the old strain behind your ears. The years that have passed belong to the wind, but your living presence rests right here in this quiet, open space. There is no need to force a sudden, dramatic awakening tonight. You do not have to feel entirely free of regret before your mind is allowed to drift into sleep. The purpose of this soft practice is not to invent a fake masterpiece out of your past, but to give your nervous system permission to lay down its heavy tools while your body rests. Even if you only feel a momentary softening in your throat before your thoughts tighten again, that brief second of release is a sacred sanctuary for your creative soul. Whenever you notice your mind returning to the habit of counting lost seasons, gently guide your focus back to the physical feeling of the air moving through your throat. There is no failure in tightening, and no need to scold your protective heart. You simply return, like a carver standing quietly in a mountain workshop, taking another slow breath as the scent of cedar fills the room. Let your breath remain light, smooth, and completely unforced, flowing through you like the cool breeze through the timber eaves. Feel the gentle rise of your ribs as fresh, resinous air arrives, and the long, easy release as the breath leaves your body. You are not required to build a temple out of your life tonight. Your wild, unpolished spirit is already a complete work of art, resting safely in the calm, fragrant dark. In a short while, our journey will lead us deeper into an open paper studio by a roaring mountain waterfall, where an elder illustrator uses an unglazed walnut dye basin to show a weeping apprentice why accidental ink splatters on hemp paper carry a deeper beauty than any perfect silk scroll. But for now, stay here with your quiet breath, letting your body enjoy this weightless release from the burden of unleaved dreams. Higher up the gorge, where the cold mountain stream tumbles over dark granite ledges, into a deep foam-flecked pool stands an open-sided paper and ink studio. The damp air smells of wet river stones, boiled mulberry bark, wet hemp fiber, and rich fermented walnut husks. Under the cedar eaves, long sheets of handmade, unbleached paper hang from reed lines, fluttering like pale wings in the misty spray rising from the waterfall. Working at a low oak table in this damp studio was a young illustrator named Nira. She had spent 7 years laboring over a single, massive silk scroll depicting the legendary mountain peaks of her homeland. She believed with absolute intensity that if she could finish this flawless masterpiece, she would finally earn a place among the royal court artists, prove her worth to her late father who had doubted her talent, and quiet the agonizing feeling of inadequacy that choked her throat. She worked with a tiny, rigid badger hair brush, holding her breath for minutes at a time, her neck locked like iron, obsessing over every hairline stroke. Late one afternoon, as a sudden autumn thunderstorm slammed into the gorge, a violent gust of wind tore through the open studio window. The gust knocked over an unglazed ceramic dye basin filled with dark, fermented walnut husk liquid sitting on the edge of her workbench. The heavy brown liquid splashed directly across the center of her silk scroll, soaking through 7 years of meticulous brushwork, spreading in a large, jagged, ugly stain right across her pristine mountain sky. Nira froze, her eyes wide, her heart slamming against her ribs like a trapped bird. A terrible, suffocating wave of shock surged into her chest. Locking her throat so tightly she could not make a sound, she dropped her badger hair brush onto the wet floorboards, fell to her knees beside the ruined silk, and wept bitter, convulsive tears. She felt as though her entire life had been erased in 3 seconds, that her grand purpose was dead, and that the universe had mocked her long devotion. Sitting near the river edge, washing raw mulberry pulp in a wooden strainer, was Elder Lin. The old master illustrator wore a simple indigo robe stained with centuries of ink, her hair silver and loose, her eyes quiet and steady like the deep river pool. She listened to the young woman's frantic sobs without jumping up in panic or offering shallow, empty reassurances. Elder Lin set down her strainer, walked over to the workbench, and picked up the unglazed ceramic dye basin. The heavy pot felt coarse, cold, and solid in her dark fingers, its inner surface stained with rings of deep brown walnut pigment. She looked down at the ruined silk scroll, then at Nira kneeling in the damp wood shavings, her body shaking with grief. Elder Lin did not tell Nira to stop crying, nor did she pretend the silk scroll could be restored to its original, spotless state. Instead, she dipped a wide, flat Gothair brush into the remaining dark walnut dye at the bottom of the ceramic basin. She stepped over to the stained scroll, knelt beside Nira on the floorboards, and with 3 bold, unhurried strokes, extended the jagged brown spill across the top of the canvas. Nira gasped, grabbing Elder Lin's sleeve, shouting in horror. She demanded to know why the master was destroying the last clean sections of her life's work, accusing her of cruelty and heartlessness. Elder Lin looked at Nira with deep, unconditional tenderness, her voice soft yet firm, carrying over the roar of the waterfall. She asked the young illustrator why she was trying to paint a sky that contained no clouds, no rain, and no shadows. She held out the coarse ceramic dye basin toward Nira, pointing to the dark, uneven rings etched into its clay interior. She explained that the basin was not ruined by holding walnut dye. Its dark stains were the very record of its long, useful life, giving the clay its deep character and soul. She told Nira that her obsession with creating a spotless, perfect scroll had turned her art into a prison, and her brush into a weapon of self-torture. She had been trying to paint a life free of mistakes, accidents, and grief, completely blind to the truth that real life is filled with sudden storms and unexpected stains. Elder Lin handed the wide Gothair brush to the trembling young woman. She pointed to the dark walnut stain on the silk, which now resembled a heavy, dramatic rain cloud hovering over the mountain peaks. She told Nira to stop trying to erase the storm, and instead use her brush to paint the rain falling down into the valley below. Nira stared at the wet silk, her breath catching in her choked throat. Her mind screamed at her to throw the scroll into the river, to give up completely, and to return to a life of quiet, safe despair. But as she looked into Elder Lin's calm eyes, something inside her rigid stance began to yield. She saw that her agonizing pain was not caused by the spilled dye itself, but by her furious, impossible demand that the accident should not have happened. Nira took a single, slow, trembling breath, letting the cold river mist expand her ribs and unlock her jaw. She accepted the wide brush from Elder Lin's hand, feeling the coarse wooden handle against her palm. She did not magically become a master in that second, nor did her grief instantly evaporate. Her hand still trembled slightly as she dipped the Gothair bristles into the dark walnut dye basin. But instead of trying to paint a tiny, perfect hairline stroke with her old badger hair brush, she leaned forward and made one sweeping, deliberate mark across the silk, drawing a dark, graceful curtain of rain falling from the stained sky into the pine forests below. The dark walnut dye spread smoothly across the silk, blending the accidental splash into a sweeping, atmospheric autumn tempest that brought the cold mountain landscape to vibrant, breathtaking life. The painting was no longer a sterile, artificial dream of perfection. It had become a raw, powerful testament to the storm that had just passed through the room. Nira set the wide brush down on the rim of the ceramic basin, her hands resting softly on her lap. Her throat felt open and clear, freed from the suffocating weight of needing to be flawless. She looked at her work, seeing the spilled dye not as a ruinous failure, but as the exact place where her true, authentic voice had finally entered the canvas. She realized that her life did not need to be a spotless scroll to be beautiful, because the stains, the detours, and the unexpected storms were the very things that gave her story its rich, enduring grain. This quiet integration beside the mountain waterfall brings us directly into the heart of why our hearts carry such persistent, choking exhaustion. When we inspect our creative regrets with slow, non-judgmental awareness, we discover that our deepest suffering rarely stems from the simple passing of time or the quietness of our throat. It is born instead from our continuous frantic demand to exercise absolute control over our life's canvas, trying to repair our sense of worth through self-condemnation and converting our unexpressed dreams into a permanent badge of personal shame. Consider the profound difference between a sudden autumn thunderstorm that blows across a mountain gorge and an artist who stands in the rain, screaming at the clouds because his paper is damp, cursing himself for not building a slate roof 30 years ago. The thunderstorm moving through the ravine represents the uncalculating reality of our existence, an organic event that touches every leaf, rock, and human life without any personal malice. That primary event contains the natural conditions of living in an impermanent world. The fact that youth fades, that obligations require our presence, or that unexpected accidents alter our original plans, that initial splash of dark dye upon the scroll carries a clean, simple reality, a single moment that occurs and then moves on into the past. The secondary agony, however, is the heavy, suffocating web we spin when we take that accidental stain, stare at it for decades, and declare that our entire story has been permanently ruined by its presence. We manufacture a second, far more painful storm inside our own throat when we insist that our past should have been spotless. We take a single detour, a quiet season of survival, or an unwritten book, and build an internal prison around it, forcing our neck muscles to stay locked, our breath to stay shallow, and our jaw to stay set in perpetual mourning. This ongoing self-punishment is not devotion to art. It is merely the ego attempting to enforce its rigid, terrified demands upon a life that naturally grows through wild, unpredictable curves. When we cling to this secondary suffering, we slowly transform our quiet throat into a rigid identity. We begin to view ourselves not as a living, spacious presence capable of shaping new beauty today, but as a doomed, tragic figure who was permanently silenced by fate. We replay our old artistic choices like a bitter, endless court trial, torturing our throat with memories of unmade paintings and rehearsing future failures before we even pick up a brush. We convince ourselves that unless we can guarantee a flawless outcome that earns widespread applause, we are forbidden from making a single mark, trapping our spirit in an airtight cell of our own making. This obsessive need for perfection and approval is a subtle poison that starves our creative soul of real joy. When we measure the value of our expression solely by how others receive it, we hand the keys of our sanctuary over to the fickle winds of public opinion. We turn our creative gifts into a desperate plea for validation, smothering our natural playfulness under the suffocating weight of our own performance anxiety. Yet no amount of self-criticism can ever rewrite a single day of your past, and no amount of regret can force a dead season to bloom again. Buddhist wisdom reminds us that true liberation does not require you to erase your past mistakes, nor does it ask you to produce a towering masterpiece to justify your existence. Peace arrives in the quiet second when you alter your fundamental relationship with the stains and knots of your life. It is the realization that while your story will always contain unexpected detours and unfulfilled plans, you do not have to turn those events into a whip with which to beat your own heart. You can allow your spirit to exist like the unglazed walnut dye basin, holding every dark mark and stain with quiet dignity, letting your life's rich texture reveal its own deep, authentic beauty. Your true awareness is like the raw hemp paper hanging on the drying lines, open, resilient, and spacious, fully capable of receiving the dark dye of grief and the gold light of joy without being destroyed by either. Your essential worth was never tied to the number of scrolls you completed or the applause you gathered in public halls. The silent years of your life were not empty waste. They were the slow, hidden seasoning of your timber, deepening your capacity for empathy, quietness, and deep understanding. As you lie here in the dark tonight, notice how your protective mind might still want to argue against this soft release. You might feel a subtle urge to defend your regret, to rehearse your past failures once more, or to worry whether you have enough time left to prove yourself. You do not need to fight those anxious thoughts, nor do you need to force your throat to feel completely loose right now. They are merely old habit patterns, built by a heart that learned to confuse self-punishment with genuine care. You are permitted to put down that heavy, blunt chisel tonight. You do not need to solve the grand equation of your life before dawn, and you do not need to construct a legacy before your eyes are allowed to close in sleep. In these quiet, shadowy hours, you can lay down your badger hair brush, set aside your need for a spotless record, and allow your weary frame to rest within the calm, unhurried grain of this present breath. This quiet understanding of the stag-handled draw knife and the dark dye basin is not meant to stay preserved in high mountain studios. It is a living, resilient wisdom shaped for the small, heavy collisions of your ordinary morning. Tomorrow, when you step back into the rushing demands of your daily routine, the world will test your open throat with its familiar, chaotic friction. Glowing screens will flash with sudden messages. Colleagues or friends will carry their unexamined stress into the room, and your old habit of self-censorship will try to force your voice back into a dark, safe vault. Consider what happens when you scroll through digital streams at your kitchen table, watching peers announce their achievements, public milestones, and effortless successes. In a single split second, a cold, sharp contraction tightens around your collarbones, urging you to swallow your own truth. Compare your unvarnished life to their polished gallery, and feel deeply ashamed of your quiet path. Your fingers reach compulsively for your device every few minutes, hunting for a drop of social reassurance, trying to force your creative identity into a rigid, artificial frame that pleases the crowd. In that exact second, you are acting like the terrified illustrator, trying to paint a sky without a single cloud, terrified that any natural flaw will ruin your standing in the world. When that familiar comparison grips your chest tomorrow afternoon, you do not need to scold your sensitive heart, nor do you have to pretend that you are completely immune to envy. You can pause for one quiet beat, feel the solid floor beneath your heels, and loosen your tight jaw. Remind yourself that another person's public masterpiece is merely their own piece of timber, while your own life holds a rich, complex grain that cannot be measured by foreign standards. You can admire their finished work without dragging a rusty blade across your own raw cedar block. You can allow your unique story to unfold in its own time, letting your presence breathe without demanding that every year yield a grand exhibition. Think too of those heavy moments when you sit among family or friends, nodding along to conversations while feeling completely unseen and misunderstood. You wear a pleasant, agreeable smile, while a heavy, choking lump sits at the base of your throat, hiding your real opinions and quiet dreams out of fear that speaking up will cause friction or invite cold ridicule. You convince yourself that your authentic voice is too awkward, too late, or too strange to be shared, choosing the safe numbness of a storage box over the risk of being truly known. If that sharp sense of isolation visits your throat tomorrow, remember that a raw block of cedar in a mountain timber yard does not apologize for its dark knots or irregular rings. It does not try to hide its resinous scent or reshape its grain to look like smooth marble. Real dignity does not come from presenting a flawless, agreeable facade to every passing traveler. True dignity arrives when you offer your genuine, unpolished truth to the room, letting your voice carry its natural timbre without needing everyone to applaud its tone. Consider also the restless guilt that haunts your bedroom when your mind tries to force Latinite productivity. You lie down after an exhausting day, but your internal critic instantly opens its ledger, reviewing your small failures, accusing you of wasting time, and insisting that you have no right to rest until you have created something extraordinary. You feel a sudden compulsion to draft late emails, organize future tasks, or replay old conversations where you felt foolish, treating sleep as a reward you must earn through endless emotional labor. When that harsh voice of self-criticism rises in the dark, recognize it as the old carpenter trying to force a straight line onto a wild piece of orchard wood. An unglazed ceramic basin does not feel guilty for holding dark walnut dye instead of clear spring water. It simply sits on the workbench, carrying its contents with quiet grace, without needing to justify its dark stains to the sky. You do not need to earn your right to rest through constant achievement, nor do you need to cure every insecurity before your body is allowed to settle into peace. Every ordinary day will offer you small, quiet chances to work with your natural grain. When an unexpected setback ruins your planned schedule, or when a quiet project receives no notice from the world, your mind will naturally want to declare failure. That immediate contraction is merely an old habit of self-defense. You do not need to judge yourself for feeling the sting in your chest. The quiet practice lies in what you choose to do right after that initial shock. Instead of taking that momentary disappointment and building a lifelong story of creative ruin around it, you can take a slow, unhurried breath. You can feel the cool mountain air moving through your lungs, release the tension in your vocal cords, and choose not to obey the frantic commands of your inner critic. You can allow a dark splash of dye to land upon your canvas, and then pick up your wide Gothair brush to paint the rain falling down the valley, turning an unexpected stain into a breathtaking atmosphere. You can care deeply about your creative expressions while letting go of the desperate need for public applause. You can offer your small, quiet gifts to the world with steady, open hands and then step back into silence when the day is done, leaving your tools resting softly on the cedar floorboards. This is not passive resignation. It is the deep, unshakable freedom of a heart that has stopped fighting its own natural grain and learned to dance with the storms that shape its beauty. As the quiet darkness deepens around your room, let these practical reflections sink softly into your thoughts. You do not need to master them completely before dawn, nor do you need to force every tight muscle in your neck to yield tonight. Simply carry the gentle image of the stag-handled draw knife with you as your body grows heavy. Know that every time you choose to stop judging your quiet throat, every time you allow an unexpected stain to remain on your canvas without panic, and every time you give yourself permission to rest without earning it, you are stepping out of the dark storage box and entering the wide, fragrant workshop of your true nature. Now, as the quietest hours of the night enfold your room, the air turns soft, cool, and still around your bed. The persistent, heavy urge to force your life into a rigid shape has dissolved into the dark, leaving an unburdened presence behind. There are no scrolls to finish tonight, No grand monuments to build for the world, and no unwritten years that need your latinite repair. Everything you have carried through your long journey, every unexpressed song, and every old regret over silent seasons has laid its weight down, resting peacefully upon the cedar floorboards of your awareness. Picture the mountain timber yard far above the valley, wrapped in total, undisturbed quiet. The cool alpine mist drifts slowly through the open timber eaves, touching the raw cedar blocks without causing a single grain to split. Down beside the waterfall, the paper studio rests in the shadow of the cliff, smelling of wet hemp, river gravel, and fermented walnut husks. Long sheets of pale paper hang motionless from reed lines under the roof, swaying gently in the night draft, completely open to the dark sky without needing a single brush mark to justify their beauty. There is no tension here now, except for the quiet, natural rhythm of your breath moving softly through your throat. Your lungs open without effort, drawing in the cool, resinous air like a smooth blade gliding along wild cedar grain, and then releasing it back into the shadowy room without any strain, without any tightness, and without any rush. With every slow exhalation, your physical frame drops deeper into the firm, supportive mattress beneath you. Your vocal cords lie completely unclasped, your jaw loose, your tongue soft and heavy. Your shoulders sink down toward the bed, broad, relaxed, and entirely freed from their long effort to hold back your truth. Allow your mind to become as spacious as that wet paper studio beside the river pool. You do not need to defend your past choices against the dark tonight, nor do you need to cure every insecurity before your eyes can close. The tired carpenter who spent 30 years regretting his grain storage boxes has set down his tools, leaving your spirit light, supple, and resting on sweet wood shavings. The antler-handled draw knife rests quietly on its shelf. The unglazed walnut dye basin holds its dark stains in peace, and your living presence remains whole, untouched, and unshakable in the dark. Feel a deep, soothing cool spreading through your throat, your neck, and the delicate hollows above your collarbones, melting the final stubborn knots left from years of holding back your voice. The tight bands across your upper chest have unraveled completely, giving your lungs total freedom to expand and contract with the quiet current of your breath. There are no court halls you must impress in this silent hour, no critics waiting to judge your work, and no price you must pay to earn this weightless ease. Let the quiet wisdom of the wild grain settle deep into your soul. The cedar tree does not fight its own knots, nor does it grieve because its trunk grew in a curving mountain wind. It simply stands on its roots, letting the rain soak its bark and the autumn storms pass through its branches, trusting that its true nature is the deep, unblemished life flowing through its rings. You are permitted to trust that same deep life within yourself tonight. You are permitted to let your weary body rest in its unpolished truth, knowing that your soul is not a ruined canvas, but the vast, open space that receives every storm with grace. Your breath grows slower now, quieter, moving like a soft mountain draft through open timber beams. Inhalation arrives like a gentle, resinous wave, and exhalation leaves like cool river mist drifting across dark granite. Each slow, unhurried cycle carries you deeper away from the waking world, drawing you down into the calm, weightless sanctuary of deep sleep. You are stepping out of the dark storage box you lived in for so long, setting down your heavy chisels, and returning to the quiet, fragrant workshop that has been waiting for you all along. The dark night will shelter you through these quiet hours, keeping your room safe while the valley wind whispers through the cedar boughs outside. There are no masterpieces you must carve before morning arrives, no unlived dreams you must fix, and no unexpressed voice you need to defend. You are safe to let your body grow completely heavy now. You are safe to let your awareness expand into the vast, gentle dark, floating like a smooth wooden bowl resting on the quiet river pool. As the last quiet words dissolve into complete silence, let your heart rest upon this one haunting reflection. What if the unexpressed beauty you were always searching for was never lost in the unwritten years behind you, but was quietly waiting, all along, in the raw, unpolished grain of this very breath? And in that raw, unpolished grain, your heart discovers that it has always been whole. The lingering impulse to grieve what was left unsaid or uncreated melts away into the cool, dark air of your room. All the heavy expectations that you carried like iron tools, Every habit of holding back your breath out of fear that your truth was not enough, and every sharp regret over seasons past has settled softly onto the timber floorboards. There is nothing left to prove in the dark, no unfinished scroll demanding your late-night labor, and no audience sitting in judgment over the shape of your life. Picture the paper and ink studio high in the gorge as the night deepens toward dawn. Cradled in soft mountain mist, the roaring waterfall has softened into a steady, hypnotic murmur that echoes through the quiet trees, carrying cold spray over the dark river stones below. Deep within the earth, the ancient slate bedrock holds its massive weight in total stillness, grounded, unmoving, and completely at peace with the damp autumn night. The heavy cedar workbench rests in its quiet shelter, its smooth timber face cool and untroubled, enveloped by an unbroken sanctuary where no sudden gale can disturb its rest. There is a profound, weightless comfort in allowing your mind to settle into that same patient stillness. You do not need to justify the unwritten pages of your past tonight, nor do you need to explain why your journey took its quiet detours. In this dark, protected space, you are invited to let your tired throat put down its heavy burden once and for all. You do not need to display your talent, carry old feelings of creative failure, or worry about whether your life will leave a monument behind. You are completely permitted to be a breathing body resting in the dark, held safely by the bed beneath you, and cradled by the calm, resinous air around you. Consider how the mountain ravine cradles the raw timber and the deep river pool. It does not demand that the cedar grow without knots, nor does it ask the water to stop churning when the rain falls hard. It simply remains open, steady, and vast, holding the entire forest in its cool, shadowy floor, allowing every tree to grow along its natural grain while the high peaks stand quietly under the stars. When you stop fighting the reality of your human limits and timing, your spirit discovers that same unshakable rest. You no longer need to spend your energy trying to force a straight line onto a wild path, nor do you need to carry the sorrow of feeling left behind. You can allow your creative nature to exist in its own time, knowing that your true awareness is whole, spacious, and unblemished. Feel the deep, restorative heaviness settling through every muscle in your frame. Your neck, jaw, and shoulders drop lower into the mattress, releasing the very last traces of held tension from your body. Your breath moves in and out with a rhythm so quiet, so gentle, that it feels like a soft mountain breeze drifting across cool river stones. Your hands lie open and still upon the sheets, completely empty of all striving, all searching, and all self-critical labor. If a stray thought or faint worry about an unfinished project wanders across the quiet space of your mind, let it drift past without trying to hold it or push it away. You do not need to examine it, solve it, or follow where it goes. View it merely as a single speck of damp fog floating through the open timber eaves of the paper studio, carried away by the gentle current until it disappears into the quiet night. The clear sky of your awareness remains vast, cool, and undisturbed, holding infinite space for everything to arise and pass away in peace. The quiet darkness wraps gently around your room, offering an impenetrable wall of protection against the demands and comparisons of the waking world. The hours pass softly in the dark, bringing deep healing to your nervous system and complete stillness to your mind. There are no tasks left for you to complete, no standards of perfection left to meet, and no past regrets that require your late-night repair. You are held in a quiet, spacious sanctuary that asks for nothing, expects nothing, and welcomes your spirit into total unconditional rest. Let your forehead broaden, let your cheeks soften, and allow your head to sink deeper into the quiet comfort of your pillow. Your breath has grown so light, so slow, that it moves through you without any effort at all, like mist drifting gently through an ancient timber grove. Each soft inhalation brings a cool sense of space to your chest, and each quiet exhalation carries away the final remnants of the day, leaving your heart clear, still, and completely untroubled. You are safe to let go of the last thread of waking thought now. You are safe to let your consciousness slip into the vast, warm dark where no future scenarios can weigh upon you, no expectations can reach you, and no self-doubt can follow. Permit your eyes to rest heavy and still. Allow your mind to step down from its long watch and let yourself float effortlessly into the deep, sweet quiet of undisturbed sleep. And as the quiet darkness enfolds your frame in complete peace, let your spirit sink into this one final enduring comfort, that the unblemished wholeness you were always searching for was never lost in the unwritten years, but was quietly waiting, all along, in the clear, settled depth of this very breath. And within that very breath, the lingering heat of every long-held regret softens into the cool, silent sanctuary of the dark. Every remaining shadow of your long struggle against the unwritten years dissolves like damp pine smoke into the mountain air, leaving no heavy ledges to measure, no forgotten canvas to restore, and no severe standards of perfection to fulfill. Everything that ever felt sharp, heavy, or frightening about your silent voice has settled like fine wood dust onto wet granite, becoming part of the quiet, steady earth that carries your frame while you rest. Picture the mountain ravine now as the dark hours turn toward early morning, wrapped in soft, resinous air. The high alpine winds have quieted into a slow, rhythmic sigh among the cedar needles, passing over the wet stone ledges and down into the sheltered timber yard below. Deep within the valley, the ancient slate bedrock holds its massive weight in total stillness, unmoving, grounded, and entirely at peace with the dark clouds surrounding it. The heavy oak workbench rests in its quiet recess, its smooth timber face cool and untroubled, enveloped by an unbroken sanctuary where no storm from the upper peaks can reach. There is a profound, effortless comfort in allowing your mind to settle into that same patient stillness. You do not need to prove the worth of your inner fire tonight, nor do you need to justify the quiet, uncelebrated path you have walked to reach this bed. In this dark, protected space, you are invited to let your tired heart put down its heavy measuring tape once and for all. You do not need to display your talent, carry old feelings of creative inadequacy, or worry about whether your life will leave a lasting mark upon the world. You are completely permitted to be a breathing body resting in the dark, held safely by the bed beneath you, and cradled by the calm air around you. Consider how the granite canyon holds the massive foundation stones of the mountain pass. It does not strain against the weather above, nor does it demand that the fog clear before it offers its support. It simply remains open, steady, and vast, cradling the raw wood in its deep, cool floor, allowing the weight to rest where nature intended, while the high peaks stand securely in the quiet dark. When you stop fighting the reality of your human limits, your spirit discovers that same unshakable rest. You no longer need to spend your energy trying to carry 10 miles of uncarved timber in your chest, nor do you need to carry the sorrow of feeling uncertain. You can allow your inner life to exist in its own time, knowing that your true awareness is whole, spacious, and unblemished. Feel the deep, restorative heaviness settling through every muscle in your frame. Your back, hips, and shoulders drop lower into the mattress, releasing the very last traces of held tension from your body. Your breath moves in and out with a rhythm so quiet, so gentle, that it feels like a soft mountain breeze drifting across cool river stones. Your hands lie open and still upon the sheets, completely empty of all striving, all searching, and all hypervigilant self-scrutiny. If a stray thought or faint worry about an unwritten line wanders across the quiet space of your mind, let it drift past without trying to hold it or push it away. You do not need to examine it, solve it, or follow where it goes. View it merely as a single speck of damp fog floating through the amber light of a mica lamp, carried away by the gentle current until it disappears into the quiet night. The clear lake of your awareness remains vast, cool, and undisturbed, holding infinite space for everything to arise and pass away in peace. The quiet darkness wraps gently around your room, offering an impenetrable wall of protection against the demands and comparisons of the waking world. The hours pass softly in the dark, bringing deep healing to your nervous system and complete stillness to your mind. There are no tasks left for you to complete, no standards of achievement left to meet, and no past regrets that require your late-night repair. You are held in a quiet, spacious sanctuary that asks for nothing, expects nothing, and welcomes your spirit into total, unconditional rest. Let your forehead broaden, let your cheeks soften, and allow your head to sink deeper into the quiet comfort of your pillow. Your breath has grown so light, so slow, that it moves through you without any effort at all, like mist drifting gently through an ancient timber workshop. Each soft inhalation brings a cool sense of space to your chest, and each quiet exhalation carries away the final remnants of the day, leaving your heart clear, still, and completely untroubled. You are safe to let go of the last thread of waking thought now. You are safe to let your consciousness slip into the vast, warm dark where no future scenarios can weigh upon you, no expectations can reach you, and no self-doubt can follow. Permit your eyes to rest heavy and still. Allow your mind to step down from its long watch and let yourself float effortlessly into the deep, sweet quiet of undisturbed sleep. And as the quiet darkness enfolds your frame in complete peace, let your spirit sink into this one final, enduring comfort that the unblemished wholeness you were always searching for was never lost in the unwritten years behind, but was quietly waiting all along in the clear, settled depth of this very breath.